Can you believe it's been over 2 years since Breath of the Wild released on the Switch? Now we know that a ton of you are still finding a ton of joy exploring the world of Hyrule within Breath of the Wild, but we also know that a lot of you have faced Ganon and have since moved on to other games, waiting for that Link's Awakening remake to drop, or the next Hyrule Fantasy. But maybe you don't have to wait so long for that next adventure. Turns out there's a ton of games already on the eShop that pay homage to The Legend of Zelda, while all holding on to their own original style. I'm Zion from Nintendo Life, and today we're going to be sharing with you some of the very best, most finest games we could find on the eShop that draw inspiration from The Legend of Zelda. From Link's first adventure to his most recent, and everything in between, we're pretty sure we found something for you. So let's take a look. If you made it this far in life without already hearing its praises, we'd be surprised. Okami HD is an utterly amazing game, and all for a mere $20, you'll gain access to a 40-hour adventure that emulates Zelda wonderfully, adds in plenty of memorable mechanics and characters, features one of the most beautiful art styles in gaming, and is a perfect title to take on the go. Even if its visuals may be showing a bit of age, Okami is still an important, fun, and notable landmark in gaming history, which also makes it one of the easiest recommendations we can make for your Switch library. I don't care if Ami was in MVC 3, Amaterasu for Smash! Pour in a healthy dose of A Link to the Past, splash in a few jokes, add a dash of Wind Waker's art direction, and well, boy, you found yourself the recipe to It'll Do 2+. An adventure overflowing with charm that borrows from its predecessors, but still finds its way to stand out in a world full of fantastic indies. Even if its art direction isn't your cup of tea, its gameplay will more than please longtime Zelda fans. And don't let its cutesy looks fool you either. It'll Do 2+ packs quite the challenge for those that are ready and willing. Kamiko is an arcade-style action game that evokes heavy feelings of Link's Super Nintendo days. You'll have the choice of playing as either a sword wielder, an archer, or a mirror shield boomerang tossing warrior. Which, Rygar doesn't have a sister, right? Its 4 levels will have you hacking away enemies, solving puzzles, and battling bosses, all for that sweet, sweet combo. Now, Kamiko won't last you too long, but is the perfect way to spend your bus ride to school, work, or well, wherever it is that you're going. We can't think of many better ways to spend $5 on the eShop. Darksiders Warmastered Edition is a faithful port of the original 2010 game that brings all the action and gore to the Nintendo Switch, but without sacrificing anything. In this starting point to the franchise, you play as War, one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, out to absolve himself of another's wrongdoings. It takes Zelda puzzle solving and mashes it up with God of War's combat, and in turn made it easily one of the most underrated franchise to appear in the previous generation. If you loved Ocarina of Time but thought it could use a little more edge, we think we found the right game for you. Putting a sci-fi twist on the old adventure formula, Songbringer is a welcome breath of fresh air. The majority of the game is generated by a 6-letter word that you, the player, punch in at the start of the game that then creates a seed. That seed will then grow and create the overworld, dungeons, secrets, and enemy placement you'll find across the lands. The developer himself described wanting to make a procedurally generated Zelda, and you can see the evidence of that scattered throughout this game. If you're looking for another game that you can sink an almost infinite amount of hours into, then look no further. The Swords of Ditto Mormo's Curse is another solid recommendation with an art style that screams Adventure Time. It's a charming, deep, and entertaining roguelike adventure, and its story holds a lot more than what's revealed on the surface. If you're looking for a roguelike that's a little less focused on the kind of twitchy reaction skills that get you killed over and over and over and over and over, you do well with this one. Also, look at this cat. He's just so big and like you can't really go wrong with that. The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth is a game classic Nintendo would have never allowed on its home consoles. But thankfully, all of that's changed now. The Binding of Isaac's randomly generated roguelike dungeon crawling gameplay mixes the combat aspects of classic 2D Zelda with cartoonish filth and gore. It might lack an overworld to explore, but no two runs are ever the same, as every dungeon presents itself with new paths and threats that are set to thwart any attempts you make to escape. Its themes may be a bit grotesque, but its blend of old school mechanics and new age thinking is something that can't be overlooked. It's an homage to the challenge and style of old games, while simultaneously presenting itself as something more contemporary. Hyperlight Drifter takes the Zelda template, de-emphasizes the puzzles, and amplifies the combat to produce something wonderful in its own right. Its challenge is often compared to that of Dark Souls, requiring some patience to catch your bearings, but its flashy fights are well worth the effort. With its neon-fueled pixel art, silky smooth frame rate, loads of bosses, secrets, and upgrades to experience, Hyperlight Drifter is one of the finest indies you'll find on the eShop, and an excellent alternative for Zelda fans alike. Kind of a strange one for this list is Crystalis, which is actually one of the games packed into the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. Crystalis was one of the best Zelda-esque games on the NES back in the day. It's a more linear experience than the original Zelda, but it features an excellent soundtrack and mixes the medieval fantasy of Hyrule with a dose of sci-fi. So if you're after some genuine 8-bit RPG adventuring, this is an excellent option. And you get a whole bunch more classic SNK games along with it too. Have you ever wanted to play a top-down Legend of Zelda game as a roguelite, while also taking shifts as a shopkeeper? Well hey, that's quite the oddly specific request, but I actually think I might know a game. Moonlighter's similarities with Zelda mostly lie within its dungeon crawling, and the loot you'll collect in said dungeons will be brought back to your shop to sell to travelers passing through and villagers living within your town. Somehow it manages to find a sweet spot somewhere between satisfying sword fighting and nitty-gritty economic sim, somewhat reminiscent of the Harvest Moon and Rune Factory series. If grindy sort of gameplay suits your fancy, there's plenty of it here, and the climactic end of the story will make it feel all worth it too. Elliot Quest takes some of the best elements from various side-scrolling action platformers and presents them in a well-rounded package. Its dungeon crawling RPG and exploration elements are a treat to play through. However, if you've never really got into Link's second adventure, it might be better to start off with something else on this list. If you're after something like Zelda 2 Adventure of Link, you should already be used to the slightly obtuse design. And with that, you'll feel right at home with this one. If Zelda were a dungeon-based twin-stick shooter, it would probably end up being something like Enter the Gungeon. With an obvious emphasis on combat, it plays similarly to The Binding of Isaac, and developer Dodge Roll was apparently inspired by Dark Souls 2. With satisfying combat, random levels, and an endless supply of inventive weapons, items, and secrets, it's always a total joy to play and offers a fresh, shootery spin on the top-down dungeon experience of the classic 2D Zeldas. Oh, and did we mention that you can play as a sword-wielding bullet? So this next game's called Minute, right? And so we're gonna see if we can give you the quick elevator pitch and keep it under a minute, okay? So like I said, the game's called Minute, and you start off in a house near a beach, right? And so you leave the house and you go out to explore a bit, and you end up finding a sword on a beach. And so you pick it up, and you get all excited because, yeah, you just found a sword on a beach, and it must be legendary. And legendary it is, but for all the wrong reasons, as whoever holds the sword is cursed and will die in 1 minute, right? Crazy. So thankfully though, when you die, you respawn back at the house that you started in. So technically you're not really dying because, you know, you're always going to come back. So technically you're kind of immortal, if anything. Quite the opposite of dying, really. And as you play through the game, you'll unlock checkpoints and ways to fast travel around the map to make the very most of the minute you have left. And so in turn, if you're looking for something really, really different and you liked Link's Awakening, Minute is going to be a great choice for you. Those Switchport wizards over at Panic Button have proved once again that they really do know how to do justice to big games within the constraints of the Switch's hardware. Hob the Definitive Edition retains all the qualities from its other platforms and then some, with only an expected downgrade in its visual department. Hob's mechanical world of whirring cogs, pistons, and robotic ruins brings to mind certain sections of Skyward Sword, and in many ways, it's Cybertron meets Hyrule. We don't know about you, but that sounds pretty sweet to us. Developer Castle Pixel has intentionally crafted Blossom Tales, the Sleeping King, with a sense of love and admiration of classic top-down Zelda games. If one didn't know better, they might see screenshots and think they were from the early days of GBA Zelda titles. While it's not as flawlessly executed as the series it draws inspiration from, it's a heartfelt tribute to the earlier entries in Nintendo's long-running series and has an absolutely charming story. Critics might get hung up on just how much it borrows, but it does enough right to be worth investigating if you simply can't wait until the Link's Awakening remaster comes to Switch later this year. If you finished Breath of the Wild and are looking for a similarly expansive open world on Switch, it'll probably be a while until a proper sequel arrives, so Skyrim is going to be your best bet. Nintendo obviously took note from Bethesda's 5th entry in the Elder Scrolls series when crafting its most recent vision of Hyrule, and despite showing its age and having countless little cracks in its structure, it still holds up as a captivating adventure on Switch, delivering a sense of space that few games before or even now have managed. Players introduced to this style of game by Zelda should prepare themselves before stepping into the lands of Skyrim, as one of Breath of the Wild's greatest victories is the incredible polish of its open world, and while still impressive, Skyrim at times can be a little rough on the edges. Although arguably more than any Zelda game that came before it, Breath of the Wild stands on the shoulders of past games from outside the company, and Skyrim is very much to thank. Despite its flaw and its age, it's an easy recommendation for anyone itching for a truly open world adventure on Switch. And now before we finish up, we wanted to give a shout out to a couple honorable mentions. And there you have it, some of the finest games we could find on the Nintendo Switch that were inspired by The Legend of Zelda. If you played any of the games we featured in this video, feel free to leave us a comment down below with what you thought about those games. And if you haven't and you want to learn more about any of them, we have full reviews for all of them over at nintendolife.com. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to dungeon crawl your way over to that like button, subscribe to Nintendo Life, and ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we release new videos. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Zion from Nintendo Life, and we'll see you next time.